Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're so glad that you are joining us today. I'm Danielle Del Sol, Executive Director of the Preservation Resource Center of New Orleans, and we're so excited to welcome you today to an interview with Louis Aubert, our very famous local colorist and interior designer. He is a native New Orleanian and Algerine,
Yes,
but he works all over the country and has been doing so for 36 years and counting. So we're really excited, Louis, to have you
thank you.
here today. Um, we're doing this as part of our Give NOLA Day fundraising campaign. As you know, the Preservation Resource Center brings you educational classes and lectures and tours throughout the year, in addition to free home repairs for low-income homeowners in historic districts. We feel that all of this work is incredibly important to keeping our city historic and authentic, and we ask for your support today. If you go to givenola.org, you can help us out. Any donation is so appreciated, big or small. Our goal today is to raise $30,000, and we're already over halfway to our goal. So we really hope that after tuning in today, you will go to givenola.org and search for Preservation Resource Center and give a little bit towards our goal today so that we can continue to offer fabulous programming throughout the year. So again, thank you for joining us. I'm Danielle Del Sol. This is Louis Aubert, and we're really excited to be talking with you today, Louis, for so many reasons.
Oh, very good.
But I thought we'd start just talking a little bit about your background. Like I mentioned to everybody, Louis has been doing this for over 30 years, but your background, it sounds like, really informed where you went. And as a native Algerine, can you talk a little bit about growing up in Algiers Point and how that
Algiers Point
influenced
it is a great neighborhood. It was like living in a little town just across the river from downtown.
you? Mm-hmm.
And it was great because we crossed the ferry when we were downtown. Downtown was our shopping district.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd go to the movies. By the time I was a preteen and teenager, we'd cross over with friends and go to the movies downtown. We'd smuggle popcorn from Woolworths into the Sanger. Actually, they knew we were smuggling candy in, but they looked the other way. We always smuggled in candy because it was cheaper at Woolworths than it was at Sanger.
That's so cute.
But Algiers Point was a great neighborhood to grow up in. It was like a little
Mm-hmm.
town.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up with six second cousins. My dad's cousins all lived in the neighborhood. We had last different surnames. The nuns knew we were cousins. I guess infamously they knew we were cousins. And it was great. You knew everyone. One day we were throwing acorns at each other in front of the school, and an old lady came up across the street. She must have been at least 50, and clapped her hands and yelled, "Stop that! Or you put someone's eye out, I'll call your mother." And we all ran. By the time we got home, she called everyone's mother.
Oh my
She knew who
gosh,
we were.
joking.
She dropped a dime on us.
Oh
And we
no.
got scolded for having thrown acorns at each other.
Oh my gosh.
We were like 7. It's like not the end of the world. It wasn't an AK, but it was just acorns. But she called everyone's mother, and we all got in trouble.
Oh my.
Which it takes a village, and they may have coined that about Algiers Point. It was definitely a village.
Yes.
And one of the best things then, it's no longer existing. There were 2 huts. There were 2 like almost like fishing camp on the Batcher near the ferry landing. One was the Girl Scout hut, one was the Boy Scout hut. And it was a single room with a wraparound screen porch, up on pilings with a walkout to it, from the top of the levee. And we would have birthday parties there.
How cute.
And when the water was up and ships would go by, the building would creak and rock, and the girls would scream.
That's hilarious.
It was a great neighborhood.
It's so cohesive architecturally,
It
and
is.
that's Campanella has explained that that's because of the fire.
And that's the footprint where I lived.
Interesting.
And so I lived on one of those perfect East Lake blocks.
Yeah.
300 block of Delaron was replaced. It replaced the firehouses that burned, Greek revivals that were there. Single and double family Greek revivals burned in 1895. By 1896, the new houses were up.
Wow.
And it's a row of mostly doubles,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of East Lake,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of classical revivals thrown in.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a picture perfect neighborhood.
Oh.
The houses were built together. The rhythm was the same.
Yeah.
There was the 6th in the row that I lived in. The one in the corner in our house were twins. The next house was a twin to the one at the end of the row.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 2 bracketed twins between them.
Mm.
And so I understand Mr. Herbert, who was a banker, bought 5 of the houses for his 5 children.
Oh,
They were
wow.
$2,500 each in 1896. It's hard to believe.
It really is hard to
I mean,
imagine.
lunch cost $2,500.
Basically.
But
Oh
I would say Mr. Herbert was a daddy. Only daddies buy you houses. Fathers don't do that. Daddies do that.
That's hilarious.
But
Well, so tell me about becoming an interior designer. How did that process
I
happen
was
for
always
you?
interested in design, and I always loved houses.
Mhm.
When I was a child, we'd draw houses constantly. Somewhere there was a scrap of paper in which mother would change shelf paper. I was a preschooler. And the story goes that she'd give me the old shelf paper. I'd sit at the table and draw. And I drew a house with a center door and 2 windows with shutters and 2 chimneys and trees flanking the house and a picket fence and birds flying overhead.
Sounds very symmetrical.
It was very symmetrical. And so I've always loved houses. And I was told when I was in high school, I didn't have the brains or the aptitude for math, so I was not going to be an architect. And I got through algebra and geometry, and I never got to trig. Yeah, maybe through 2 years of Latin and 2 years of Spanish, but never got to trigonometry.
Yeah.
But, and so I believe them, they were probably correct. So I ended up in a more artsy field. I went to business. I had double degree from Loyola in marketing economics, a minor in accounting. And I first worked for the Travelers Insurance Company, and I hated it. I was there about 6 months, and they were nice people, and it was a good job, but I just didn't like it.
Yeah.
And that's why I went to work for the D.H. Holmes department store here, D.H. Holmes Company Limited. And I was put in the drapery department first and very quickly moved to interior design. And so I learned hands-on.
Oh, wow.
We had our own workrooms. I worked with ladies in the workroom, the drapery workroom, and the men in the upholstery workroom.
Wow.
And I learned a lot while I was there. I was there 13 years.
Oh, wow.
I did not close the store. Someone else closed the store. I left before the store closed. The store was shrinking, and my job was eliminated. I had offers in town and out of state, and I wanted to stay in there. I love New Orleans. I didn't move to the city. So I made a list of what I liked about what I did, what I disliked, and what I really loved doing. I always helped clients with color, and I wasn't paid for that. It was just a courtesy. They were working with them on their interiors.
Yeah.
And so I decided I could make it, so I started doing other cities. They were doing it in California. I thought, well, I could do that here.
Yeah.
And so I thought, if people understand what I do, I'll be fine. So getting started was a little slow at first. Then it picked up. And then fairly early on, I was on This Old House with the Algiers Point.
Cool.
This Old House in 1990. It aired in 91, and that gave me a push.
Oh, I bet.
That was a nice bump.
Yes.
Both locally and beyond the city.
Yes, that's awesome.
And so I had faith in myself that the work was out there, people would see it, and I'd get more work.
And you went on to do color and design for some of the most iconic buildings in our city.
I'm very fortunate. I worked with some wonderful projects, great architects.
Yeah. Well, so for those of you who are just joining us, welcome. Thank you so much for logging on today to watch our wonderful interview with Louis Aubert, who is a renowned colorist and interior designer based here in New Orleans, but who works across the country. I'm Danielle Del Sol with the Preservation Resource Center, and we thank you so much for joining today. We hope that you'll support us today on Give NOLA Day. You can do that by going to givenola.org and making a donation to the Preservation Resource Center. Every dollar counts, and we're so grateful to you for your support today and for tuning in. And Louis, we're going to start our slideshow here of images because, of course, as colorists, we got to see your work. We got to understand what's going on. We're going to start with actually your own home, and images from the exterior of the home, interior, and we have some garden photos here. And could you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here?
It's a 1917 bungalow. The only alteration really is the porch has been altered slightly. It had stocky posts with stucco piers below. That was altered in 54 by the son of the original owner. It was built in 17 by Mr. Broad, William Henry Broad II. William Henry Broad III and his wife moved in 1954. And they made some changes, not a lot, and good changes for the most part. I think they did very nice things with the house. They maintained it beautifully. I bought the house in 94 from Mr. Broad's second wife, who was then his widow, Maud Broad.
Oh, that's fabulous. Maud Broad.
A very early uptown real estate lady.
I love it.
She was a contemporary and worked with Gertrude Gardner.
Oh.
And so it's a great little bungalow on Neron Place. It's one of the city residential park streets.
Yeah.
Pre-zoning, there were park streets starting with Rosa Park, Everett, Richmond, Audubon Place, Newcomb Boulevard, Neron Place, and a few others in town. And they had restrictions, a 20-foot setback, residential only. And it made for very nice streets. I wish they'd done more. St. Louis has tons of park streets.
Really?
And that really inspired the New Orleans park streets.
Oh, interesting.
And so Neron Place is oak line. It's a third round of trees. It was in 1910 when it was established. It was first was hackberry trees, fast growing but not long lived. By the 40s, they were coming down. They were taken down. They were replaced with camphor trees. Camphor trees burned in 1960 and 62 during very long, prolonged freezes here. And then they planted live oaks. Yay for the live oaks. Live oaks are there and they're beautiful.
Wow.
The front of the house is there. To the right, the larger photo is the garden shed, a cement block shed, which I embellished. I had the little arbor across the front, and I closed the window with a frame and did a shell kind of grotto-like thing. That was my handiwork. The creeping fig on the fence is what I call faux topiary. It's just flat, but it's shaped to give more depth from the house looking out to the shed. The center photo below is, again, seeing the shed from a side view. The bust is also embellished with shells. And the photo's lower left corner is looking up at the ceiling in the small addition that I put in the house. It's a bookcase wall, storage below, and a whitewash ceiling. Everything's painted white. It's sort of coastal feeling, very simple. The outside sheathed in shingles, because shingles were often used in the arts and crafts houses. I thought, why not have shingles? And so I did that. It's 2 walls of glass, which you can't see the photo, but when you're in the room, it's like being in the garden. As much as I love New Orleans gardens, there are times of the year when it's nicer to look at the garden than be in the garden.
Right.
We're approaching that very soon.
Yes,
so
we
I'll
are.
still be looking at the garden.
That's great.
But the house is great. It's a very functional house.
Yeah.
Interesting thing is, it's about 20 years younger than the house I grew up in, 1896, at your point, 1917. I think houses changed more during that one generation than any other time.
Wow.
Victorians were very fancy, higher ceilings, beautiful, lovely, but often larger houses, a lot of waste space.
Right.
Bungalows are built to be very economical. More windows, more light, more air, a very functional floor plan. This house had living room, dining room, kitchen down one side, bedrooms, bath, and hall between them on the other side. I kind of like pulled the drawer out of the back. I matched the gable on the front of the house to the rear of the house, same roof pitch, same gable in, and just pulled it out to form a small den, a side entry, laundry closet, and a half bath.
Oh, great. Wow. Very livable.
Yeah, not to overpower the house.
Yeah.
We hear complaints about houses being enlarged to a great degree now.
Yeah.
I've seen some houses uptown in which they saved the front 6 feet and build a giant 2-story house behind a little 6-foot gap, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah.
It changed the rhythm. I think camelbacks are great. Camelback in a house still keeps the rhythm of the street going.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some additions are very good
Yes.
and can be terrific, and some not so.
Right.
So-
Agreed. Well, I want to talk about this historic relationship you've had with the Preservation Resource Center, because we go way back.
We did.
And I think it's really fabulous to look at this house. This was the first Operation Comeback house that the PRC did in Holy Cross. So throughout the life of the Operation Comeback program, the PRC restored over 60 vacant and blighted properties in Holy Cross. And we actually started that work pre-Hurricane Katrina. We did a few houses, including this one. I believe this was 2002, 2003.
Like that.
And then when the neighborhood experienced flooding during Katrina, we had to come back and do it all over again. But we did more and more and more. And so it was really amazing to learn, Louis, that you worked on this house and chose the colors for this house.
We decided at the time to really make the house stand forward. So we did something a little bolder at the time. The house kind of a pumpkin color. It's drop siding. And if you look carefully, you see the darker narrow bands are picked out in the same Indian red as the doors, transom, and window sash.
Yeah.
That Indian red repeats on the shingles up in the gable. The trim is not white. It's kind of sort of a pale kind of cream khaki. The foundation's painted sort of a sandstone color rather than battleship gray. And the porch is sort of a stone color. What you can't see in the photo is the ceiling. The ceiling was a beautiful kind of aqua blue-green, like a watery blue-green, not the typical sky blue.
Right.
We did that because when the drop ceilings inside were ripped out, we put a lot of paneling, a lot of drop ceilings, and peeling the onion back to the original form. We found these beautiful wood ceilings painted that same sort of aquamarine.
Wow.
Aged with time, and for the most part, we could save them.
Wow.
They were cleaned, encapsulated with a clear coat, so we know nothing's going to peel and fall.
Right. Right.
Then we were sure it was lead.
Yeah, of course.
It had to be lead.
Of course.
And so we did that. I brought that color outside. Now, the great part of this was we had an open house that was complete. That's my favorite story about this house. And we had uptown matrons and PRC board members and employees and Operation Comeback people. And the neighborhood was invited. And we had ministers in the neighborhood and church ladies and people on the block. And everyone came to, everyone loved the colors. Bar none, everyone commented on the colors. Everyone was thrilled with the colors. And I thought, and there's such a diverse group.
Yes.
All like the same thing.
Yes, it united them.
In the Catholic Church, you're required to have 3 bona fide miracles for sainthood. So I thought I'm a third of the way there. It's like to get this diverse group to all agree is, it's like committee work.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a firm believer that a camel was a horse designed by committee. So everyone loved it. And the house was beautiful. And that was our first. We did others. And when we first started doing it, I did individual colors for each house. And I also worked on the colors for in October.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
now rebuilding together.
Right. Hmm.
And at first year, it was in Lower Garden District, Riverside Magazine,
Hmm.
and there were 5 houses. People were leery of having a free paint job. It's like, yeah, right, a free paint job. No one believed
What's
this.
that going to look
So we
like?
got 5 people to agree, and I went and looked at the houses, and without speaking to everyone, I made little cards with body trim, shutter, porch deck, ceiling. And on the back, I had 5 different combinations. On the back, I wrote which house I thought would look really good in this combination.
Mhm.
None of the homeowners agreed with that. They each chose another combination.
Oh, no.
I thought it was great. It taught me a lesson.
Yeah.
It's like, don't dictate in this case. And so instead, we just had combinations. They went on for many, many years.
Mhm.
Sherwin-Williams was the donor of the supplies.
Okay.
And when they changed their color fan deck, I had to go back and rethink it.
Mm.
When I rethought it, rather than doing combination, I did a menu format: 2 trim colors, 5 or 6 body colors plus white,
Uh-huh.
2 ceiling colors, 2 deck colors, 2 shelter colors. Any combination like a Chinese menu could work.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
homeowners had fun.
Yeah.
The group captains had fun.
Yeah.
With permission of the late architect Lloyd Vogt, I used his drawings from his book,
Oh, we love
indicating
that.
what constitutes accent and trim and body, with lines drawn in.
How clever.
And then everyone played and had a great time.
That's so great. Oh my gosh. Well, I want to talk about another PRC related house, and that is this home on Josephine Street,
Right.
Which actually is part of our logo,
Yes,
the
from the
Preservation
beginning.
Resource Center,
Yes.
from the beginning.
And it looked like the house on the right.
Right. So I understand that you chose these new, fresher colors.
I did.
Can you tell us a little
Andrea
bit?
Bland did the renovation there. She's done a number of properties, does beautiful work. She always
Mhm.
does a great job. She called me. This is our second or third project together. And we wanted to be fresh and light. And we chose a sort of dusty rose, a soft green for the shutters, and a near white for the trim.
Beautiful.
And you see how she restored the Gothic tracery on the lower floor. It was missing. She replaced it. It was missing. It's a large house on a very big lot. Has a nice driveway, long driveway, and a big backyard. It's a beautiful house, and it needed someone to love it. Like so many houses, they need a new owner sometimes, and this one got a good owner.
Absolutely, that's wonderful.
Josephine came out really pretty.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I want to talk, Matt, about one of our most significant structures here in the city, which is Gallier Hall, which was City Hall for New Orleans for many years. Now the city still owns it, but it is an event space with some office space as well. And it underwent a significant renovation several years back under Mayor Mitch Landrieu as part of the Tricentennial, and his wife, Cheryl, helped oversee the fundraising and renovation work as well.
It was all done with donors and sponsorships. The first room we did is the upper left corner, the front ballroom. And I was called in and asked to meet with them to discuss this. And I immediately asked, how many people are you speaking with? Because I tend to walk through a building and give it away. So I thought, I'll give them an hour. I'm not going to give them 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And they tell me only me. And I said, how is that possible? And because it was donors and sponsorships, not city funding. And one of the really great things about this is Mayor Landrieu looked at the building, and for the bicentennial, the cathedral's in poor shape. More than 100 years ago, and locals raised money to restore the cathedral at that time. So this time for the tricentennial, what could they do of a similar nature? And Gallier Hall, part of the hall had fallen off, literally.
Yeah.
Part of the corners fell, broke, chipped several of the granite steps. It could have been disastrous.
Yes.
It was just before Carnival. It could have killed people who were in the stands there. So fortunately, it didn't happen. So the exterior was pulled tight, made watertight, looked at the interior, and Mayor Landrieu was bright enough to look to other cities. Other cities have done similar projects in which, if the building is going to bring in income, that income should be tied to maintain the building. Right. So instead of money going to the general coffers, it now goes to maintain Gallier Hall.
It's wonderful.
It was done top to bottom, mechanicals, everything was done, catering, kitchen, everything. And so now it can maintain itself.
Yes.
The ballroom on the left, to the rear walls, a huge triptych by George Dureau was commissioned by the Arts Council for this space. And his glorious sort of goddess and godlike figures, big volute curves rolling by. He was inspired by the parades rolling past the hall.
Oh, wow.
And someone in their infinite wisdom over the years decided to take a pink color, one little bit of pink out of the painting, and paint the entire room 2 shades of pink. That was the first one we did. And I started working on it. I said, this is not good. 2 shades of pink. It's like the old movie, like the old movie version where the bride said she had 2 distinct shades of pink, blush and bashful. This was not blush and bashful. This was liquid Pepto-Bismol and dried Pepto around the mouth of the bundle.
Oh, no.
It was really bad. and placed badly. They started to stop colors in an inappropriate way. And so it was the first room we did. We did it in a simple kind of grayish, more neutral, more bridal, more approachable for brides and such. The drapery pulls in the neutral color with some blues. It's embroidered, woven damask-like fabric, and it's very popular. Brides love it. The other photo is what we call the map room. It's behind the mayor's parlor. And I did this tawny gold because a lot of maps have kind of a sepia tone to it. The Historic New Orleans Collection became involved, and the curator there selected images. The mayor also thought of that. He referred to the front hall, the main hall of Gallier Hall, on the principal floor as the Hall of Dead White Men. All these old portraits of mayors. It was kind of somber, of course. And so we placed them elsewhere, but the hall now has photographs that indicate the history of the city, the history of its people, the culture. As you walk through the hall, if you look at what's on the wall, you kind of get a sense of where we are and who we are. On the top floor, there's a whole section of the hall down with just photographs of the hall, going back to the 1850s with parades rolling by and people and celebrations. It's a beautiful concept. It worked very well. It was a great project to work on. It was really interesting in that there's the hall. That's one of the halls. That's the main hall on the principal floor. At one time, there was an old photograph I saw, probably from the 30s and 1940s, when it was still City Hall, and they painted the lower 5 feet of the hall dark, it looked like dark brown. I don't think it was black and white, because people were wearing white shirts and dark. It looked like it was probably dark brown and kind of a muddy tan above it. It was very ugly. It looked like a bomb shelter. And so we had nothing to base the original colors on. So I looked to the history of James Gallier. The Galliers were originally from Dublin, Ireland. Their name was Gallagher.
Oh.
They moved to New York, seeking their fortune in the New World. And when they got to New York, he was an architect. He realized that Irish immigrants in New York had the status of a gnat. So he changed his name to Gallier. And they didn't pronounce it Gallier, it's pronounced Gallier.
Okay.
And then they moved south. They followed the money to New Orleans. New Orleans was booming at that time.
Right.
And fortunately, they came here, and Gallier Hall was one of the results of their moving here. So I looked at what he might have seen in Ireland, what might have influenced Gallier. And Gallier would have seen the great houses built by the Adams brothers, bold colors, strong intense colors. So I went to the strong green and the turquoise on the ceiling panels with chalk white. That better complements the black and white marble.
Yeah.
It runs through, that's hallway in all 3 levels, plus the stairwells. The stairwells have these tremendous heavy cast iron railings. The handrails are about so wide, it's incredible. It's the mayor's parlor, the front left as you enter the building. It was red. We kept it red. We changed the red and did a red drapery with it. It has a very regal sense to it.
Yes, it does.
They don't have to worry about the mayor's portraits. They're used in other rooms. On the top floor, there's a large room painted a deep chocolate. And these old gilded frames, these dark background portraits just glow against the chocolate.
Oh, wow.
The curator from the Historic Collection placed the art, and she loved the chocolate brown room for those portraits. And that was my hope as well.
Yes, that's wonderful. Since we're looking at this beautiful photo of the green hallway and the turquoise ceiling, and that makes me just think about color combinations. And there are some true New Orleans classic color combos.
There are.
And so let's talk about that a little bit. Obviously, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but the scale of the house dictates, how you think about color a little bit. But there are just some natural pairings that go so well together.
There are, and they feel very, I call it comfort food. Comfort food, like comfort color. Everyone feels comfortable with a mid-tone body, light trim, dark shutter. Any combination is going to feel right.
Yeah.
You can challenge that and do lighter shutters, lighter than expected. You can do body and trim one color, which is very traditional. So it could be a white house with dark shutters or a white house with pale blue shutters. You can do a lot of things.
Right.
I think what influences me, I look at the style of the house and the period which it was constructed. Clients, I used to ask clients, what do they like? And the clients often ask me first, what do I like? Without being biased by their opinion.
Right.
And I appreciate that.
Right.
I still want the house to reflect the ownership.
Yeah.
My houses look very different one to the next. I don't do it's not formulistic. I don't do the same combination
Right.
And I make a point of never doing a similar combination near the existing house.
Oh, that's very
I've ever
thoughtful.
not to come back to this.
Very
I have many houses in several blocks. I'll
Yeah.
have as many as 4 or 5 houses on one block.
Wow. Oh my
And
gosh.
I tend to cluster sooner or later.
Yeah.
Uh,
Neighbors get to talking. They love
neighbors
it,
talk,
yeah.
and people who work together, the kids go to school together. So I
Right,
can usually
right.
connect the dots.
Yeah.
The cottage on the left is on Britannia Street.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful little cottage. It was a single lady who lived there.
Mm-hmm.
And we did this sort of peachy shell color with a creamy trim, but not yellow,
Mm-hmm.
and a soft green shutter. It's under a shade of a huge live oak to the yard next door.
Beautiful.
Upper right is a cottage on Camp Street.
Mm-hmm.
Classic double, turned single with 3 long windows to a single front door. East Lake. So we played with the red. Indian red was very big.
Uh-huh.
Indian red was the dominant window sash and door color in New Orleans, about 1870 to about 1900.
Oh, wow. That's a
And they called it
significant amount of
Indian
time.
red. Politically incorrect, but they called it Indian as an American Indian.
Mm-hmm.
The lower photo on the right, a raised bungalow in Carrollton. And I use colors that were very kind of arts and crafts, a mid-tone body, kind of a golden body.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a kind of a linen colored trim, not a white trim.
Yeah.
I think when you get off the pure white trim, the whole world opens up.
Yeah.
White trim can be great,
Sure.
but it's often used as a stopgap, just so simply to have white trim.
Mm-hmm.
But there are lots of whites and neutrals and softs that look
Mhm.
better with colors. Sometimes. Like these look better not having a bright white trim.
Yeah. Yeah. These colors remind me that green is so beautiful paired with unexpected colors. I mean, when we looked at the Josephine Street house earlier, green with pink is such a beautiful pairing. Peach with green is such a beautiful
Pink and
pairing.
green so preppy, you can't just pink and green.
It's true.
It's
It's so southern. We love it.
It's East Coast too. Pink and green.
Yeah.
Not outside.
True.
They don't do it out. They do it inside, not outside.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of Lily Pulitzer, but it can stay on the floor.
Yeah, true, true. Good point. Good point. I love these two as well. I mean, the one on the left is just spectacular.
One on the left is just very bold.
Yes.
It's a very tiny house. It's like a room and a half on each floor. It's the tiniest of
Really?
house. It's one room with a kitchenette in the back corner, a tiny staircase, and a bathroom where the door swings out instead because it couldn't swing in. You have to step out to change your mind. Upstairs is one large bedroom at the front, nice sized bedroom, and a tiny little compartmented bathroom. It's like a little honeymoon cottage.
Mm-hmm.
The house on the right's at East Lake double, lots of detail, and again, Indian red sash and doors.
Yeah.
And you see a little bit of color behind inside the brackets, the fans of the brackets, the pierced blocks, and above on the gable, there's color behind the scroll work. So the scroll work just pops just a bit.
Oh, I love it. We are blessed to kind of have permission. We've given ourselves permission to have such bright and bold houses here in New Orleans. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It varies by neighborhood.
Yeah, true.
I would say
True.
neighborhoods
Good
are
point.
like cousins in a family. Some are more sedate than others. Some are more raucous. You get down the Bywater and the Marigny, it's more bohemian.
Yes.
It's more fun.
Yes.
The same color in the Bywater can be embraced, and not so much on some streets uptown.
Okay, good point.
And vice versa. They might consider a color from uptown might look a little too sedate in the
Yeah.
Bywater.
Yeah.
It swings both ways.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And so I think what happens is, I won't say it's leveling out, but I think people are being a little more open about color. We're seeing a lot of all white houses and white houses with black window sash. And color is a pendulum, it swings back and forth.
Yeah.
All these white houses seem so new and fresh suddenly.
Right.
Truthfully, 1910, a lot of houses were white, including the Victorians. So we just painted white with dark shutters.
Okay.
That was the age of the City Beautiful movement.
Uh-huh.
Classic usually white governmental buildings. The red brick colonial for Jeffersonian colonial courthouse or firehouse or post office, little white columns and a cupola on top. You see them around the country. You get that. You also had the idea of broad boulevards lined with a single species of trees, which we're fortunate to say were live oaks.
Right.
So we have a great heritage of miles and miles of oak-lined streets in New Orleans, major streets. Sometimes the streets get weak architecturally, the trees hold the street together. We catch back up again.
Yeah, I love
There's that sort of, I would say deadly, but sort of forgotten zone of Esplanade from Rampart to Claiborne for sure, almost to Broad. Looking much better. New infill houses, very appropriate infill houses, but the trees have always held it together.
Yeah.
As we lament the loss of the trees on North Claiborne. Right. The trees there were park-like.
Right.
Those that remember it, the median is very wide where the interstate ran over it.
Yeah.
And the trees were 4 abreast of that median. It was a linear park for that neighborhood. It was a very big commercial section for that community.
Yeah.
All lost to the interstate.
It's terrible. Yeah.
And so we value trees, we value house, we value sense of community.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
The role of scale.
Yeah, let's talk
Okay.
about size. I mean, obviously, having a building like this, you're not going to paint this bright yellow.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't. I would not.
But, how do you consider, a humble shotgun and how color might make parts of it pop versus a very grand home on St. Charles Avenue?
Okay. My approach is the same. I look to the house, the architecture, and what's appropriate.
Hmm.
It's like wearing clothes that are appropriate to your size.
Hmm.
It's the same thing.
Sure.
Uh, this house, the Jaeger Monroe Mansion, now the Hebe residence,
Hmm.
classic. It looks more Newport than New Orleans.
Yeah.
It's one of the grand houses of the city. I'm very happy to work on that several times,
Oh.
under more than one owner, in fact. Um, what's interesting is the balustrade above the second floor appears to be stone. It's wood. It's cypress. And there's a cypress turned balustrades and rails and panels, but all painted a stone color. It becomes part of the stone. It's always been that way. It's always been painted a stone color.
Right.
And so we kept the house very quiet, very simple. The garden is it's sort of set like a jewel in this garden,
Yeah.
but it's a sedate house.
Hmm.
And to paint that house a color would seem very strange.
Indeed. Yeah.
And so you don't do that. Where smaller houses, by the same token, you look at them and
Hmm.
you think, what can they be?
Right.
And they can be more playful.
Right.
What I love about color is that color is a wonderful tool. You get to put your fingerprints on the house and make it your own as the homeowner,
Hmm.
but you haven't changed the architecture.
Right.
So if you paint the house a color the next owner hates,
Right.
the house is still there. You
Yeah.
repaint, you repaint
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Interesting, I ran across years ago the fact that some doubles built as investment properties,
Mhm.
turn of the century,
Mhm.
previous century, would paint the front only. And the sides were stained either barn red or dark green. It was cheaper.
Gotcha.
And there was one in Algiers Point that I worked on that was done that way. And we kept the sides stained dark red
Yeah.
and painted the front white. And very classic, very simple, but the
Yeah.
sides were stained red.
Yeah. Let's go to the next slide, please. And another example. So here's a jewel box little house.
Yeah, a little house, you can be more playful with it.
Yeah.
The owner wanted something more playful. And so I brought the idea of the Victorian method of painting the louvers one color and the frame of the shutter a second color.
Hmm.
It's not done very often. It's a little more expensive to do it this way. This owner was happy. I think they painted themselves, I believe.
Hmm.
And you see the colors that repeat on the shutters repeat on the door. So the raised elements of the door, the framework around the glass, the panel below, the little cutout piece below the sill of the glass
Hmm.
are picked out in second color. It
Hmm.
plays up those elements. The brackets have a little color in, so you can't see it from this angle, but the brackets have a little bit of color behind the scroll work also. A little sort of little fan-like piece on the tiny gable.
Yeah.
It's like a little miniature dollhouse.
Yeah, it really is.
And this is taken some years after it was painted. The first owner planted the creeping fig and kept it trimmed. The second owner, not so much. It's got a little wild and woolly. It's still charming, but it's not as clipped as it once was. Other extreme, Garden District.
Yeah.
Beautiful Queen Anne, and the client wanted it very simple. So it's barely tone on tone. You have to look very carefully to see that it is just slightly tone on tone.
Mm.
It's mostly one color, just a variation. And the front doors paint a little bit of a color to hint at what's happening inside the house.
Hmm.
Next door, similar vintage house next door. I did that one also, but it has a color with light trim and dark shutter.
Okay.
So you see how they juxtapose one to the other.
Yeah,
One of
interesting.
the more contemporary, basically all white look, which has its place, and that could have been painted that way in 1910.
Yeah.
Ironically, everything's very contemporary now, but it's 100 years old.
Everything old is new again.
It's a pendulum. It swings back sooner or later.
Yeah.
I always say what's new is what's new to you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's new.
Well said. Okay, let's look at the next slide.
Very classic side hall, Greek revival, Esplanade Ridge.
Mm-hmm.
It lost its porch, unfortunately, but they kept the columns, kept the entablature. It was fully restored. Again, we kept it very simple. Without shutters, I did a little darker body color to give more contrast to the white trim, the entablature and the porch post.
Beautiful.
Beautiful doorway with pilasters, and then one shot of color at the front door. Doors are great because you can paint them a color. If the person who bought this house wanted a black door, shiny black door, it's a quart of paint and a weekend.
Yeah.
If they wanted to be fuchsia, they want to change up the seasons, they can do anything they want, but you don't change the entire house.
Right.
Or you can do, if I painted the whole house red,
Right.
I saw a house recently, I won't say where, and unfortunately it was painted a dark battleship gray. It was a duplex, battleship gray with black trim
Oh.
and red doors. it didn't look really good. It had a soul sign in front of it. Someone liked it,
Somebody liked it, huh?
or they're going to repaint it, one of the two. But it was a similar idea to this, but the black trim just really killed it.
I bet.
The white trim would have been fine, but or a white trim of some sort. Here we did not do the contrast window sash. We kept it more simple and more classic. I think it just looks like a little gem. It could be on the PRC logo. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
St. Charles Avenue, Upper Line.
What a beauty.
I did this one probably, oh gosh, 25, 30 years ago. It's changed hands a few times. They haven't changed the colors very much over the years.
Oh, interesting.
Really interesting. It's like an ivory color with a more of a crisp white trim, a dark sash. Originally it had dark green sash and deep blue shutters. And the owner's children and their friends call it the House of Blue Shutters. It's a blue porch ceiling, kind of more sky blue, traditional sky blue.
Yeah.
If you look closely, the posts are paneled, and we've picked those out in the house color. It would have been more jarring and more busy to pick out a dark color or a contrast color. But just repeating the body color, you identify the elements, the brackets, the spandrels, and the post, but in a more subtle way.
So I want to pause real quick and ask you about the sky blue porch ceiling. So this is a thing.
Yes, it is a thing.
Can you explain that to our viewership? And also, is there one color blue you go to every time?
I don't.
Okay.
I do lots of different blues.
Okay.
I go blue green. I go sky blue. I've even done midnight blue.
Oh, interesting.
The midnight blue is very striking. It's
I bet.
the right place. It's kind of wonderful.
Wow.
The classic sky blue, a white cottage, the sky blue ceiling, and black green shutters. Green black shutters with a stone gray porch is classic. Yes. And it always feels good.
Yes.
The blue ceiling, people always say it's there to keep bugs and bees from nesting on the ceiling, which is an old wives' tale. Yeah. The truth is, it goes back to ancient Roman times. Ancient Roman times, houses turned their back to the street. The streets were filthy and they were dangerous. And there'd be an arcade in the back of the house around a courtyard space. And so the ceiling of the arcade, we painted sky blue with clouds. You felt you were almost in the garden. The Italian Renaissance revived this. The English go on the grand tour of Europe, mostly Italy, and they see it. They brought it back to England in the 18th century. By the time they got to America, we lost the clouds for the most part, and it's sky blue. And it is a beautiful treatment. Sky blue looks very pretty on a lot of houses. Some form of sky blue. But the true story is so much better than the mud daubers and hornets.
That's true.
So it goes back to ancient Rome's house, much more romantic than
very
saying
classy, very
kept
classy.
insects off your ceiling. And I have seen mud daubers and bees nest on a blue ceiling. So they're not that stupid.
I have too.
They're not that dumb.
Yeah.
They can figure it out.
Indeed. I think we have one more picture in this series.
Okay. Upper left is like a parent, I shouldn't have favorites, but upper left is one of my favorites.
Really?
Upper left was This Old House.
Okay.
In Algiers Point. It was renovated in 1990 and it went public on PBS This Old House in 91.
Wow.
And it was done in mauves and plums and dusty plums, and sort of the ceiling was done kind of a periwinkle, kind of a lavender blue ceiling. Beautiful bracketed double turn single. Elvis and Jean Golden were the owners. And from the beginning, Jean told me she wanted lavenders and plums on all. It terrified everyone from Boston. They were frightened of what might happen. And so with this scheme, Jean was very happy. The house gets painted. The final night pass party, Jean shows up and she's finally dressed up. She's always in scrubs and she's always working on the house. So she shows up all dolled up and she pulls out her makeup little packet, this little box like thing. She flips it open and shows me all the colors were there. I didn't realize they were cosmetic colors, but it turned out they were. The porch, you can't see the photo, but the porch is striped. I did 2 board and 3 board stripes, or tone on tone, like a keyboard on the piano. And the color goes through cycles. Color actually does move through cosmetics and women's ready-to-wear, then men's sportswear, and then soft home furnishings, towels, linens, that sort of thing. Then into appliances, then finally into cars. And it runs through that cycle. And as it does that, the colors become more and more popular. Right now, white is a big thing. Some versions of white is very big. Grays remain pretty big. Warm neutrals are more popular than cool neutrals. So it's a gray. It's not a blue gray. It's more of a stonier kind of grayish. The house on the right is also in Carrollton. It was painted pink with an orange door prior to this. The new owners wanted to keep it pink. And so if you look closely, there's a stucco band that connects the windows just below the overhang of above the second floor. And so I picked that out in a pale stony gray and put that on the columns as well to kind of anchor the house just a bit. And so we kept the pink, but we sort of made it a little more sophisticated, not so pink.
Gotcha. Okay, we've looked at a variety of house types.
Mhm.
Do you have a favorite? Again, pick your favorite child and tell us what
It's like it's hard. It's like I want to offend all the other children. My work varies tremendously. I work
Yeah.
in contemporary houses, I work on old houses, I work on all different styles, and commercial buildings and institutional and churches and schools, all
Right.
sorts of things.
Right.
And I enjoy all of them because they're also different. My work
Mhm.
varies a great deal, and it makes it very interesting.
Mhm.
Right now, I'm working on 2 churches. I'm working on the interior with Peter Traplin, the interior of Trinity Church on Jackson Avenue renovation.
Mhm.
And I'm also started working this past week on what was Our Lady of Lourdes on Napoleon Avenue being turned into a venue. And it's a great 1920s Spanish mission, very different.
Mhm.
So the buildings vary a lot. They're all interesting. If I had to choose one variety that's really fun to work with and
Yeah.
really interesting, I have to say shotguns.
Shotgun.
Shotguns, because they're little doll houses, but they have so much detail. They can vary from very modest to rather elaborate.
Mhm.
They can be Greek Revival, Italianate. They can be Eastlake. They can be Colonial Revival.
Yeah.
English Tudor. Sometimes even arts and crafts. Occasionally, I have one that's been, I won't say remodeled, but remodeled in the 20s. And it's this arts and crafts facade, and inside it's an 1880s shotgun double.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. And you get to play with that as well.
Several of the people I'm seeing are asking about different eras. So a 1920s bungalow. Do you have a certain color combination you'd recommend for
The
that?
bungalows, in other cities, they were built with a lot of stone.
Right.
We don't have native stone.
Uh-huh.
If you go to Bungalow Heaven in Pasadena, California, and it's wonderful.
Yep.
The Green brothers, Green and Green,
Yep.
did these incredible bungalows. The Elton Bungalow was the now museum house and the Gamble House in Pasadena.
Right.
I've been there, and it's incredible.
Mhm.
They had such a firm hand on everything. The brothers Green did everything. They designed the stained glass. They stood on site and placed the stepping stones where the maid would go outside and hang the laundry.
Wow.
They were that specific.
Wow.
Brilliant. Details you have to really look to even see. The house sits on a very large property. It sits back from the street. The drive, big curved drive, big crescent drive in front. The garage is off to the side. The crescent drive is this very hard red brick. Not to see the red brick, they did a slight berm to the lawn, just an open lawn in front of the house. So from the street, you don't see the driveway.
Oh, wow.
Very subtle things.
Yeah, that's clever.
They mix brick and stone on the patio in the rear. The terrace looks down to the arroyo, looks down to the canyon below. Those houses often look to stone natural colors, tans, browns, olive greens, earthy reds, even orangey reds or terracottas. And when I do houses here, I would like to bring those colors in. Often we don't have stone yet. A few times we have stone, not often. We usually have St. Joe hard tan brick, which is still a tan brown. And so I can pull from those colors, tans, grayish, but earthy tones.
Interesting.
19th century, it ran through periods. Early color was not very available. It was hard to put pigment, get a good color. So a lot of houses were white with green shutters. Dickens visited America in the 1840s and 50s, and he said the American houses were the whitest of whites, and the blinds, meaning shutters, were the greenest of greens. He was very impressed by his White House because that was the classic revival. America looking at itself like a republic, like Rome or Athens. Classic white houses, green shutters. Very classic. As paint technology increased, you could have colors, and people craved colors. So by 1870, 1880, so polychrome Victorians, 5, 6, 10 colors on a house. By then, Indian red was very popular for window sash and doors. It was the dominant color in New Orleans for window sash and door from 1870 to about 1910. If you scrape a lot of houses down, scrape the wood down, you'll find red against the bare wood.
Interesting.
Very often. Occasionally dark green, mostly red.
Oh, wow.
They had a color they called buff, kind of a slightly golden tan.
Okay.
There's a color they called drab, which is more of a brown tan.
That sounds appealing.
Olive. They had olive. Drab sounds good. My house painted drab. Give me 2 shades of drab and a scoop of green.
Sign me up.
Sign me up. But it's a beautiful combination. You don't see it around town almost never now. Very, very seldom do you see it. It fell out of fashion. It's a pendulum that swings back and forth. Following the Victorians, very colorful polychrome houses, colors placed very carefully to draw attention to the various elements, the various textures. If shingles are done in courses, they might have one course in one color. If it's square cut, they might have scallop cut or fish scale cut. They would play with those things, and they would have dark sash, and it would not be white trim. It would be a tan or a buff trim.
Yeah.
I find when you want to do color on turn posts, if you're going to do rings and things, it works better with a color than a white post. White with rings can look like jangle bracelets.
Yeah, interesting.
The color can hold it together.
Interesting.
Occasionally, a house in one color can look very smart.
Yeah.
I'm working on a house now at St. Charles and Octavia, across from Danielle Park.
Oh, yeah.
And it's two tones. It's a big stucco, 2-story, 2.5-story house, the gambrel roof on a raised base, but it's a very big house with a new fence going around it now. And it's basically a stone color, but not a brown stone. It's kind of an in-between shade. And it gives the house its texture, heavy textured stucco, and there's wood and there's shutters, and it plays up the textures nicely.
Yeah. Another viewer is asking about their East Lake home in Mid-City.
Okay.
Any color combos that
East
you really
Lake,
like?
again, East Lake love colors.
Yeah.
They would do some grays, they do some blues, but they would do a lot of off-white trim, not a bright white trim necessarily. And they would do color contrast window sash.
Yeah.
That was very popular in that period.
Yeah.
And that color would contrast with the shutter color. And so East Lake's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
If you want to see an East Lake that has lots of colors, the house in the corner, it's the downtown river corner of St. Charles and Constantinople. It's in the block at Ray Memorial Church, down at the corner from Rain. It's an East Lake, polychromed, colors placed in an appropriate manner. There's no white anywhere in the house. So take a look at that. It might inspire you.
That's great. Okay. I want to talk about the classics, some of the classic New Orleans iconic buildings that you worked on. We've already talked about Gallier Hall.
Okay.
But my gosh, Commander's Palace, now that is...
It's trying to get more iconic than Commanders.
It really doesn't. And especially with the color, too.
Commanders is a landmark in every sense of the term.
It sure
in many, many ways.
Yes.
And I was called, I've done work with the ladies there a number of times on several properties. And when I was called to look at the Commanders building, it had wobbled off to blue over the years. And I said, turquoise is always your color.
Indeed.
Turquoise is your signature color. We brought them back to turquoise.
Yeah.
And did the turquoise striped roll down awnings around the ground floor, and just a crisp white trim, very classic, very clean. It's a commercial building. It wants to be seen, and it should be seen. And so there we are. We brought them back. Miss Ella and Miss Dottie was very happy when we did this.
That's great.
And we brought it back to the turquoise.
I love it. Okay, what's the next one we have on the slide here?
It was a great former corner store building in Lower Quarter on Royal Street. The ground floor is now parked. It's a condominium.
Okay.
It was converted probably about 20, maybe 25 years ago.
Okay.
And the developer was a client, and I did the colors then. We did them kind of khakis and terracottas and stone colors.
Okay.
And the ground floor is parking, apartments above. And then about maybe 7 years ago, I got a call from the condo association. It was ready to paint the building. They wanted to change it. So we changed it. And you look at the doors, these are picked out, the panels are picked out. It's sort of tone on tone, kind of gray blues. And we changed the palette, but kept some of the same placement.
Gotcha. All right, let's go ahead and go forward. Here's an iconic home on Carrollton Avenue.
Okay, that's they call it the Wilkinson Villa. It was an early house in Carrollton, certainly a landmark, one of the few Gothic revivals in town. It's now the Joseph Bruno residence. And when it was done, Peter Charlton again was the architect, worked with Peter quite a bit. And it was a very small house, 4 rooms on each floor. It's cruciform, 4 rooms on each floor. Each room has windows on 3 sides. Very unusual house with an octagonal stair hall in the center. There was a small lean-to the left rear corner. It was a kitchen and an accessory, and it was just done in board and batten. And so they wanted to expand the house, but do it in an appropriate manner. Of course, it was very appropriate. Peter built an L-shaped wing behind the house and built this little sort of breakfast room, almost like a hinge, holding the new section onto the original. And the new construction is all done in board and batten. No attempt to match the house as such. The house stands on its own. The wing subservient. And so I was called in, and I thought the house should have a deep red because it picks up the brick. And we did a stone color for all the trim. Used the same stone trim and same deep red for the window sash and doors on the addition. But painted the addition kind of a mid-tone to darkish green. So it just sort of fades in the land. It's a large property. It's probably a little bit of a quarter of a square block. This is just a part of the front yard. It goes far to the right. And it goes way back, his garden on the left as well. So the back building now sort of sits back, the pool, and it sort of sits in the landscape. Renee Franson was the landscape architect, did a beautiful job. We knew the house, it's great. You look out and you see tropical foliage. I
Wow.
feel like you're in English colonial somewhere. Yeah, it's a
Wonderful.
great
Yeah.
house.
Okay, I think we have one more in this series, and let's see what it is. Oh, it's the St. Roch Market.
St. Roch Market, again, iconic. When you work on a building, it's iconic and public. It's like a double whammy in that everyone has a sense of ownership.
Oh, it's so true.
And so here the architect was Lee Ledbetter, and I was called in to work with Lee. And we looked at the building, and there's a red brick base, and I didn't want to pick up the red brick, but the red brick anchors it. Let's leave it alone. We did a light trim and dark green for all the louvered panels that wrap around the building. Very simple. It's almost temple-like. So we kept it very, very clean, very simple. It looks like it's been this way forever.
It does.
It could stay that way forever.
Yes, indeed.
And so everyone was happy.
That's great. We have a very practical question in the chat
Good.
here that I wanted to ask you. Do you ever mix and match paint colors from different companies?
At one time, you could not do that. At one time, I did a house in the Garden District 25 years ago, and we had to use paint from 3 different companies because no one could match the deep red of one company or the deep blue of another.
Interesting.
It's much better now, but my suggestion, if you're going to match from one company to another, have the sample chip of the color what you're matching. And when you match the paint, put a dot of that paint on the chip and let it dry. And you'll see if it's a good match or not.
Yeah.
A lot of colors can be matched, not all. There's still some variation.
Yeah.
One caution too, if you look online, they all have paint companies like Benjamin Moore and Sherwin-Williams have great online sites.
Yeah.
And you can pull up colors online.
Yeah.
They're not always true.
Right.
Be careful.
Right.
For instance, Benjamin Moore's Black Forest Green, the dark green black we see on shutters everywhere.
Yeah.
Online, it looks black.
Oh,
you see no
interesting.
green in it.
Interesting.
In person, you put a black pen next to it, and you can see it's got green in it
Yeah.
next to the black pen.
Interesting.
But online, it simply looks black. So
Yeah.
be careful online. Most companies now offer peel and stick samples for
Yes.
$5 or $6 a piece.
Yes.
And some even do free shipping.
Yeah.
It's great when you're doing a flat surface like interior walls. I'm not as big on using those outside. Sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not. When you look at a frame house with siding, shiplap with lap siding, clapboard siding,
Yeah.
there's a shadow line under each board.
True.
That's part of how you perceive the color.
Right. True.
So when you place samples, if you're going to paint them on, there should be 2 coat samples. I do at least 2 feet square.
Oh, interesting.
And I butt them against the trim and put the trim color right next to it.
That's so smart.
That way you can get the shadows and the profile of the molding and such, and get a real idea what the color looks like.
That's so clever.
It's also good to sample sometimes on the front wall of the house if it's shaded by a porch, but also sample it where it's not shaded. So put that trim color on the face of the post also.
Yeah.
I've had clients, we've sampled front and back. Sometimes the back is more important. I remember one client, they were both doctors, and we sampled the front of the house and the back of the house. Well, they got home late in the day. They worked very hard. They got home late. They'd sit around the pool in the back and have a drink before dinner, and they'd look at the house. Well, they liked both combinations we sampled on the front of the house, but on the back of the house, they preferred one color.
Interesting.
And that was their choice.
Gotcha. That's so clever. One of these comments, I think it's going to lead to a bright future for both of us, and that is, do you have plans writing a book on your career? And the answer should be yes, and you should do that with the Preservation Resource Center.
I know, it should be yes. I've been told I could do a book for a long time now.
Yes,
and I really
you
should.
should.
I've got to find a ghostwriter to help me with it. But color is incredibly important. It's a wonderful tool.
Yeah.
It's almost like a free tool in a way. A bucket of paint is a bucket of paint. White, green, blue, purple, mauve, shadow, whisper, hush, all these various things that mean nothing other than you identify the color.
Right.
And what color is hush? Which I think is funny. I want to name a color perfect beige. So we'd sell 1 million gallons.
You really would.
Perfect beige, perfect taupe.
Right.
When I first started, a friend sent me a cartoon from the English magazine Punch. And it was 2 matrons, kind of like, turbans and coats and scarves tied under their chin. And they're looking at a rack of paint samples. And the caption says, taupe. What the hell is taupe, Wendell? And it's no color to paint your lamp. And it's true, color name. Color names turn people off and on.
Right. It's true.
One client years ago, a big colonial revival house, not Gallier, say where, and we're doing it a butter yellow with white trim and dark green shutters. And they had massive steps to this house, big steps to a landing and steps again to a landing, a porch across the front of the house. And they had a collection of cast iron urns and troughs, beautiful, like little winged lions below the troughs and handles, and very Greco-Roman looking things. and they were painted black. Well, I decided to look at it. They were bronze tone with the brick and with the color of the house. And so we looked at a bronzy brown, and the client said, "What's the name of this?" I said, "It's Clinton Brown. This is pre-Monica." And
Oh God.
my client said, "Oh no, we can't have that. No, cannot have Clinton Brown." I said, "Well, if we don't tell Mister what then, find out, he'll be very upset."
Oh my
So
gosh.
names have a
too funny.
double-edged sword. They can influence you yay or nay.
That is too funny. We have a question that you've alluded to.
Okay.
But I think a lot of people would be interested to know your answer to this. How do you feel about the White House trend? Is it on its way out? And you said,
Okay.
that's actually historic.
It is historic.
Yeah.
1900, there were lots of white houses. I live on Neron Place,
Yeah.
and I've been told that every house on Neron was white.
Mm.
My bungalow was white. When I bought the house in 1994, I
Right.
started scraping it down, and there was nothing but white paint there
Mhm.
with apple green window sash and shutters.
Mhm.
And so a very dear friend said, "You got to keep the house white and make it interesting as a challenge." So I kept it white, did the trim kind of a khaki,
Mhm.
and darkened the green sash a little bit.
Mhm.
And I was very happy. It's been painted again since then. It would have been painted last year, but because of roadwork NOLA and dust and dirt, it was not painted last spring or this spring. I'm hoping next spring. They tell us in 3 weeks it'll be done, and no one believes that.
Yeah, no.
I'm thinking by the end of the summer, hopefully it'll be off our street. And
Yeah.
things will, more than dust will settle down.
Yeah.
But white houses can be beautiful.
Mhm.
I think there are houses that were really meant to be white. I think of a few that are no longer white that probably should have stayed white.
Mm.
I think Greek revivals are beautiful in white.
Mhm.
The little Greek revival cottage that I showed you, I would have done it in white, but it was being done for resale.
Mm.
And it had a little more flash, a little more
Yeah.
show to it
Yeah.
for the buyer, for the seller. But I think a white house could be beautiful. There are lots of whites though.
Yes.
I've done white
True.
houses.
Oh my gosh,
I used
there's
to
a
place
million
signs.
white.
I used to place signs in front of houses when they were in Worth, by name and number. I stopped doing that. Just commotion to pick up the signs. And painters would move the signs and it became more problem than it was worth.
Yeah.
I don't really need the signs at this point. I probably should do it, but I don't. And one of my clients said that friends called and said, you hired someone to pick out white paint for your house, but it was a very different white.
Mhm.
There's a house on Jefferson. We did it white a couple of years ago. It's a soft, soft white. It's a beautiful house across from Isidore Newman, dark green shutters, sort of a granite gray porch, soft sky ceiling, very classic.
Mhm.
Prior to that, it was yellow with white trim, red sash, and like electric spearmint green shutters.
Oh wow.
Well, my client was outside working in his garden. We finished the house, and a neighbor walked by, walking the dog, said, "Well, I love the new colors. I hated those Louis Aubert colors." And the owner said, "Well, Louis didn't choose the yellow. Louis chose the white. The yellow was not my doing. I got blamed for
You
it."
were vindicated.
I was sad to say my client defended me and told me the story. I think it's a funny story. I got blamed for this electric yellow house.
Oh my God.
My fingers were not on that, but the white was mine.
Yeah.
You can imagine I chose some white.
Oh, that's
But white
hilarious.
houses can be beautiful. There are many whites. And again, if you do the 2-foot square sample, you get that shadow line. You'll see if it's going gray or tan or yellow or even pink.
Mm.
Whites can go all over the board.
That's so true. Yeah.
And so whites can be beautiful. Whites can be tricky.
Yes.
And just brilliant white can be great. A little house I did in just past Christian, it was under shades of usual oak trees. We painted the little cottage white, dark green shutters, gray porch deck, blue ceiling. Classic. It's always in shadow, which is even prettier.
Yeah, I bet. Louis, this has been a blast. I hope that you'll come and do more programming with us.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
So more to come. So as we wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about the streetscape. So when you are working on a house, obviously you're not doing so in a vacuum.
No.
There are houses all around it. And so how do you take into consideration the surroundings?
I always consider the streetscape. It has to work in context. I've seen houses that are beautiful. I just don't think work in context. I look at the neighboring houses. We want something that suits the neighbors. The French have an expression that colors do not match, they need to be able to dance together.
Ooh, I like that.
It's a great expression.
That is a great.
And I think it has to work in context. It has to work for its purpose. Is it residential? Is it commercial?
Yeah.
Is it institutional?
Yeah.
I've done very different buildings. St. Stephen's on Napoleon Avenue, exterior, very different exterior than Miss May's block away.
Indeed.
Miss May was yellow with a dark green band. And when I worked on that, I thought they wanted to change it. They wanted to give a new look to Miss May's. They opened some French doors on the magazine street and did some signage change and a patio in the back.
Yeah.
It's a dive bar, but it's a nice dive bar now.
Yeah,
And
it's
so-
fabulous. The colors you chose are
And so we
gorgeous.
went with a plum and a deep eggplant for that band.
Yeah.
The original dark band is still there. So we
Yeah.
respected what was there and did
Uh-huh.
an interpretation of it.
Uh-huh.
St. Stephen's had wobbled and gotten to have pink and white trim at one point, which was deadly against the brick and the stonework. Now it's more of a kind of a butterscotch color, and it pulls everything together.
Uh-huh.
And interior, we play with the interior colors too, and highlighted the beautiful features inside the church. It's a grand church.
Yeah.
Um, this building is on Oak Street.
Okay.
It's a very large commercial building, ground floor commercial, residential above. Vaguely arts and crafts. Look at the gable at the far end on the left. And you see little bits and pieces, casement windows and such. That massive block building filled what we have in the backyard. It's a big, almost warehouse-like space. So what I did there was the ground floor is a rusticated block. It looks like stone. It's a stone color. A dark color for the sash. We repeat that sash color on the upper floor, but much lighter on the upper floor. So we have a weighted base to the building. Then rather than just stretch that color out with its block at the end, we made the block a dark, solid block, a solid mass. So it stands on its own, but still relates to the original part of the building.
Very cool.
And it fits the streetscape. It was to be a commercial space below, unknown tenant. So we're working with it with an idea of who could be here.
Right.
And so we didn't want to get too cute or whimsical.
Yeah.
We wanted to be a little more, and it could change. The front door we painted a bold color, so I moved in.
Sure, yeah.
And where they have a chartreuse door, they could do that.
Right.
Or a red door.
Right.
But we kept it as simple as possible to make it more saleable,
Yeah.
more rentable.
Yeah. I want to close out by referencing Margot's question here, and it's a good one. You know, what are there any really good resources on New Orleans paint colors that you would recommend to this group?
Okay. There's not a book on New Orleans colors as such.
Yeah, because we're going to write that.
We're going to write that book.
Yeah.
That's in that.
Stay tuned for that.
But there are books. There are good books on color. Roger Moss did a wonderful book on 19th century color.
Okay.
He's out of Philadelphia.
Okay.
And it talks about color through periods. It's a very good book. It's Roger Moss. He and his wife were speakers at Longview some years ago.
Okay.
Very nice people. Beautiful book. Great book. There's the Painted Ladies series of books are fun.
Okay.
Okay. There's Painted Ladies, Daughters of Painted Ladies in Waiting, America's Painted Ladies. Our shotgun house in Algiers Point, that was this whole house, is in America's Painted Ladies.
Fun.
Some of the houses though are very, very busy.
Uh-huh.
In the Bay Area, some of the houses are like circus wagon, almost gypsy wagons.
Right.
Everybody wants to live in a gypsy wagon. If you do, that's great. But everybody wants a gypsy wagon. But you see great colors.
Yeah.
And you see how they place color. And there is some writing, and there's a little bit of writing in the book explaining how they got there. So that might be a good place to look.
Okay, great.
There's not a lot of books as such. I mean, all design books have color.
Yeah.
And they all talk about color to some extent. And most designers' books some do talk about color, how to put things together, like how to be a decorator, how to do this, how to do that.
Yeah. Louis, thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
For a wonderful day, wonderful
It was
conversation.
fun.
It was a blast, and I hope we'll do it again soon.
Very good.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It was wonderful to have you today. We hope you'll support us once more on Give NOLA Day, which is today, May 2nd. You can do so by visiting givenola.org and making a donation by typing in Preservation Resource Center. Find us on Give NOLA's website. Any gift, big or small, is incredibly appreciated by our humble nonprofit, and we thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon.